Hi, welcome to the VBE podcast. I'm Daniel, and I am here with Shane Ogden. A little bit of an intro for Shane, and then we're going to really dig into things here. Shane Ogden is the superintendent of Park County School District 16 in Meeteetse, Wyoming. Forgive me, I'm reading from notes here. Before Meeteetse, Shane worked in larger schools and districts across Wyoming, Utah, and Idaho. And those experiences helped him see that even in the smallest schools, innovation can thrive when people care deeply about the success of every learner. And that's what he stays focused on. What matters most is the students. Meeteetse School embraces project-based learning as a way to connect classroom learning with real-world experiences. The students design, build, question, and create. They learn to think critically, work collaboratively, and take pride in what they accomplish. Whether they are building lanterns that symbolize leadership, collaborating with community partners, or presenting their ideas on national stages, Meeteetse students show that learning can truly happen anywhere. Shane, welcome. I'm really excited to dig into our conversation today.
Thank you. What an honor to be here.
All right, so before we dig into project-based learning and the work you do, for anyone who hasn't heard of Meeteetse, set the context for us. Tell us about the community, the students, the teachers. What does the student population look like?
Sure. So Meeteetse School is located in the town of Meeteetse. We have 325 residents in our town. I know when I say that, people are like, oh, a school of 325. So our school is under 100 students, and that's pre-K through 12th grade. Meeteetse is located just nestled into a beautiful valley on the Grable River in northern Wyoming. And we have towards the east entrance of Yellowstone. And so just a beautiful place to live and to be. And our community is made up of people that work in energy industries. We have some work that is involved in oil and electricity and all of that good stuff. But we're primarily made up of ranchers. A lot of ranchers that here are here, and kind of some of those legacy families, as well as families that are hired on to come and manage properties and be a part of it. So of all the places that I've lived, and I've loved all of them, this certainly is home.
Thanks for that. Sounds really community connected. And K-12, you've embarked on project-based learning. Now, PBL, project-based learning, that can look like a lot of different things. It can mean a lot of different
Sure.
things to different people and different places and different contexts. So what does it actually look like on a typical day in Meeteetse for teachers and for students?
Yeah, so when we embarked on all of this, we kind of looked at PBL, and some places will define that as problem-based learning, where it's not necessarily focused in on the projects, but it's focused in on solving problems. We have actually embraced the project portion of that as well. And so, putting those two into context, it's really having students learn through problem solving, having students learn through using their hands, using life skills. We have our competencies that are part of our profile of a graduate, and those 7 competencies really drive the skills that we want kids to learn, because our community and our state as a whole has kind of established that these are the skills that students are going to need to be successful in their future, not necessarily just today. I think they'll be successful today as well, but really we're trying to build for a better future, and having good test takers it is great, but it's truly not going to get kids where they need to be and have the skills that they need in order to lead our communities and our states, our nations, and the world here in the future.
Yeah. How did it all start? I mean, was there a moment?
Yeah.
Was there a conversation? Was it at Meeteetse? Was it before? Where did it start for you? Where did it start for Meeteetse?
hmm
And you said, our students really need this. They really deserve this. And teachers too. you do a lot of empowering teachers in the work you do. And so what was that moment? What was that conversation, or what was the problem you identified? Can you pinpoint a
Yeah.
moment? Yeah.
I think I really can. I think initially the reason why I got into education might be similar to some, but I think it's not the normal. Um, I just had a real passion for kids and especially teenagers, probably because my wife says I still am one. And I think that just school, I excelled at school as a student, but I also played the game. I knew how to um, get away with not doing work by just schmoozing with teachers and being able to get by. And I wanted education to be a little bit more meaningful than what I experienced. So that kind of goes back to the groundwork. When I was principal at Logan High School in Logan, Utah, I had the great privilege and opportunity of helping to redesign and rebuild our high school. And in that process, I got to work with some amazing architects, construction firms, a man by the name of Christian Long, who came in and did a Wonder by Design project. And that's when I think my overall thinking shifted away from kids need to be able to do well on standardized tests to kids need to be able to have life skills. And if we're teaching critical thinking, problem solving, communication, creativity, man, we education's robbed creativity out of kids. And if we can do whatever we can to bring those things back, I feel like our students are going to be way better prepared for their future. So that's when that catalyst hit me. Then I came to Meeteetse and I served a year as principal before becoming superintendent, and I've just completed my 10th year here. But when I was first put in as superintendent, our school board came to me and said, we just came back from a conference and all of these national industry experts are saying that the skills of critical thinking, problem solving, communication, and creativity is what they're going to need in a workforce moving forward. So that was in 2017. From that time until now, we really started to work on that. We did different iterations. We started with Genius Hour and let kids through all grade levels kind of pursue different projects on their own that we just were there to support. However, they were more projects. They weren't tied to learning. So that evolved and it ended up that then COVID came. And when that happened, we were just all focused on everybody's emotional, physical well-being and kind of didn't pursue too much more of that efforts towards student-centered practices. And then all of a sudden we had a great opportunity. There was a shift in our staffing. There was a shift in the culture of our school because of just brilliant and amazing educators and a wonderful principal that we just kind of were able to make that shift. So all the stars kind of aligned. And and then we knew that the student-centered practices was the route that we wanted to go. So that overarching big concept. And I've probably been known as being more of a student-focused administrator throughout my career. Probably has driven some teachers crazy. But I really think when we start to see that students are our customers and our clients, that we start to say, okay, we need to figure out what they need, not necessarily what I want to give them. And so that all kind of blossomed. We were able to have some partnerships with the University of Wyoming, and through that, we were able to send out pockets of teachers from our school to go and explore different types of student-centered practices. And so we looked at CAP schools, we looked at a Montessori school, we looked at project-based or problem-based learning schools, and our teachers came back and were really drawn to one of these buildings that we went. And so we were able to send about half of our staff to that building over the last 2 years, 3 years. And everybody came back and said, this is the school that I want to teach in, but more importantly, I want my kids to be a part of. And so I think when that parent lens and hat comes in and they're like, this is how I want my kids to learn, coming from an educator says a lot. And so that was really the point where we said, great, let's do this. So we had a group of teachers present to the board that said, hey, we want to jump in with project-based learning, and we want to not do a pilot program or anything like that. We just want to dive in. And they gave us our blessings because it aligned with what they were trying to ask us to do for the past 10 years. And it just blossomed to something that was totally unexpected, because we hit roadblock after roadblock. We stumbled along the way. When we talked about diving in head first, we really dove into the shallow end. And if you've ever done that, you know you come up scratches and bruises and all sorts of stuff, skin off the tip of your nose. That really is what I think we experienced last year when we embarked on this. And it wasn't long in that process that we realized that the biggest piece that was missing in our work was the student voice. And so we're like, well, let's change that. As administrators, we just kind of set the non-negotiables and then told the teachers, go and build this. And then along the way, we had to add in some different parameters. One of those was making sure that students were involved in every decision that we make. So having them serve on different committees was huge, and our best ideas came from them. And the other thing that we tried to do was we tried to survey our students and our parents on a regular basis, meaning like every other month we were saying, hey, how's it going? What do you like? What don't you like? Our first board meeting after starting it, we had our parents come to us in tears about the pressure that their students were feeling, and we just had to work through all of those. And some of those parents that were most concerned at the beginning are now some of the biggest advocates and see the true value and growth that students are making, not only in their academic life, but also in their personal life. And so that was kind of our journey. And then this summer, we just ramped it up a little bit more. We realized that we were going about this kind of just building it on our own and trying to just learn from the different books that we've read and different schools that we saw. And I think that was great because we said it has to be ours. We can't take something from one place and say this will work for us. And then having the students involved to help build that, I'm pretty excited for this new year to come. Because the majority of our teachers at this point have now had official training. And we did go to PBL Works, PBL World, which was a great exposure. And as much as I love PBL Works, we also recognize that not everything that is advocated there is what works right for us. And so appreciate that the partners that we have in lots of different people recognize that we're going to build our own system. And as we've had a lot of people come and look at what we're doing from around the state and even some of the surrounding states, we've had some schools come in to just look at what we're doing. That's the number one thing that we tell them is this is what we're doing because this is what works for us. And anything that we can share and give you, we're happy to do that. But ultimately, you've got to build it for your community. And we just feel like what we've built is on the verge of being what we need for our community.
Yeah, that context matters. And you mentioned student voice and choice. It sounds like that's not just happening in the classroom. You're really giving them voice at the school level, decisions at
Absolutely.
the school level, and all of that. And I really appreciate hearing the journey. Someone listening might think PBL, it's something I want to do. It sounds great, but it just seems so overwhelming. It seems so big. Where do we start? And so it's helpful to hear you say that, you have a robust K-12 model, but really you started with where project-based learning often starts is start with a project, start with a genius hour, right? And see how that goes and then build on that. And you've even spoken to some of the systems like the profile of a graduate, making that very specific for Meeteetse K-12. And another thing you mentioned that I want to go back to and hear a little bit more about is you mentioned some early culture shifts too. So you've got those practices, you've got those early projects, you've got these systems that support that. Talk a little bit about what were some of those early culture shifts? What needed to
Yeah.
happen for, it sounds like teachers, parents, students?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Certainly, it starts internally. It starts with teachers and staff in making any type of a culture change. Anytime an administration comes in and says, "Hey, this is the culture we're going to become," my experience is I've fallen flat on my face. And so it really has to come and be driven by the people inside the school and inside the district. So one of the good things that happened as a result of COVID was we had this influx of ESSER money. And while a lot of districts ended up just buying stupid stuff, and trust me, we bought plenty of stupid stuff, we kind of valued and thought that the biggest value of that money would be in professional development for our teachers and making every teacher feel like they are a true professional. And most professionals in outside organizations, their organization or their company is going to provide opportunities for them to grow and to develop and to be on the cutting edge. And so what we did was we took a fair share of that money and said every single one of our teachers is going to attend a national conference that will then strengthen their ability to be not only a teacher but also a leader in our school. So we were giving teachers voice and choice inside what we were doing. We started talking about what are the things that we require you to do as a district that we need to get rid of that would free you up to have more flexibility to just do what you love, to be with kids, to help kids learn, and to kind of be that partner in learning. And that's one of the points that kind of opened my eyes again to what the role is of a principal and a superintendent, especially in a student-centered practice organization, is our job is to remove those obstacles. And so what we started to do was figuring out, okay, we've required you to submit lesson plans. Why are we requiring you to submit lesson plans? We don't have time to read them. You're not getting feedback from them. And so, that's just an example of some things like let's break down some of those just organizational traditions that we've done because we've done, but really don't have the value in it. And, turning in a small school, professional learning communities looks a little bit different than it does in most of the rest of education world. And so that was another way that we were able to really empower our teachers to have some control and to really talk about things. So through all of that, we had a group that decided that they wanted to create a climate and culture committee. And through their efforts, I think all of our teachers started to feel like they mattered, they were of value. We were willing to spend money on them to go get some professional development, and they didn't get to choose necessarily exactly what that was. So we wanted to make sure that it still was building towards the organization as a whole. But just that sense of value that is felt among teachers, I think that's really where the biggest culture shift came. And it came as teachers were pushing other teachers, recognizing that if they've established their own non-negotiables that they're the ones that have to hold each other accountable to those. And so I think when you do that, you start to get a culture that thrives. The other thing that we did that I think was very beneficial for our transformation was a small community in a rural spot in Wyoming. It's pretty hard without a lot of housing. It's really hard to recruit teachers. And so we actually went to our community when we couldn't fill some positions and were able to find individuals. Our art teacher was actually a veterinarian. Our trades teacher was a machinist for NASCAR at one point. Just going out and finding people that have the skills to help our kids become successful. And then we can work with them to get the credentials that they need in order to be certified. And Wyoming has a great system that allows us to give a temporary endorsement while someone's working towards that. And that changed our culture as well, because you bring somebody in that has not gone through all of the university education pathways, and they just have different ideas, and it's like, hey, I don't know how to write a lesson plan, but I know how to show a kid how to fabricate this piece of material that we need. And I think that was kind of the final tipping point in our culture change, is having those perspectives come in and those teachers wanting to cross collaborate with other content areas, and because that's what industry does. And I think it just kind of shook the proverbial education tree to a point where we got kind of the dead fruit knocked off, and we're able to start growing some really great fruit.
Yeah, thank you. It's a really refreshing perspective. I think when a lot of times when you hear about culture shifts for students, for teachers, or within a school, there's kind of the blame game that happens. It's a lot about, you hear someone talk about attitude shifts. You know, how can we change or shift behavior or attitudes, and the culture conversation can go there quickly. And what I hear you saying is for teachers and really for students, but primarily starting with teachers, is to say, let's treat them like professionals. Let's not try to
Yeah,
change their attitude or their behavior. Let's change our treatment of them, the money that we put towards them, the time that we give them, the respect that we give them, and to treat them like professionals. And I think you could apply that to students too, and it sounds like you do.
that's
But
it,
not
right?
saying you need to shift your attitude or you need to change your behavior, but we're going to
Yeah,
change the support that you have, the respect that you have, the investment that we have in you, and the rest follows from there.
right, right.
I want to,
And that is the next step, right? Of course, that is
mhm,
the next step. Is once the teachers buy in and see what value that is, that then becomes a pretty easy conversation about how do we provide this for our kids now. And because of that, and teachers having the ability to have more voice, serving on different committees, leading the direction of our school, it really opens the door to how do we let students guide their learning? How do we help students be engaged and feel ownership in their grade and in their learning? And that's still a rough transformation, right? Because that's not the way the education works. And teacher role has completely changed in that, from I have to be the know all be all to all of a sudden I can learn from my kids, and they might bring something forward to me and say, "Hey, I was watching a TikTok video and this is what they did with this." And for a teacher to be willing to say, "Let's try it," is is the culture that we're finally at, that is pretty amazing.
yeah. Now, some of the shifts you've mentioned, the transformative work, it's within, as you've said, a small rural district. So, let's say a listener is part of a larger district, and you collaborate a lot with
Yeah.
leaders of larger districts. What have you seen that works for somebody to apply what you're saying, especially about that idea of removing barriers and asking teachers, what would make your job easier? What would make your life easier? Or what can we take off your plate?
Hmm.
Have you seen that work in larger districts and those leaders you've collaborated with? And kind of what advice would you give to somebody, a
Yeah,
leader
sure.
in a larger district, to say, like, where do I start?
I'm going to start with I'm going to kind of reverse design this a little bit. And what I would say is, if you want that change to happen, the biggest impact will be at a student level. If the students start demanding it, it's going to happen. If the students are like, hey, we'd like to at least have some say in how we're going to be assessed, or instead of taking a test, can we demonstrate this skill in a different way to you? And I'm not saying that all tests need to go away either, because they don't. We still probably have some quizzes and tests that happen, and the one thing we wanted to get rid of is worksheets. We wanted to make sure that it wasn't just that. So I think the biggest power comes when students start demanding it. Then I'll jump to the leader. I think that if you are a principal, you have a great opportunity to empower your teachers, even within the confines that your district is going to put on you. I think that principals have an opportunity to do that. When one of the biggest shifts that has to be made, in my opinion, to truly get to student-centered learning is stop doing standardized test prep. The best test prep that I think we can do for our kids is to teach them how to think critically, and not spend all the time drilling and killing released items from standardized tests. So that's an easy shift to make. I think that in the long run, we don't have our official results back, but the preliminary results that we got back, we moved our lowest scoring students higher than we have ever done in my 10 years here during this first year of PBL. And again, we don't have all the results back because of some things that they've got to recalibrate at the state level. But just those preliminary findings are pretty awesome for us. If you are a teacher and you've got a building or a team that doesn't want to do student-centered practices, if that's PBL or something else, I think that you still can find ways to give students voice and choice within your curriculum, even if you still have to do the common formative assessments and the same summative assessments and stuff like that. I think that you can turn learning into hands-on opportunities in all of your classes. Too often we talk about student-centered practices falling in our career tech ed programs. And I'm like, those programs are already designed to be hands-on. They're already designed for that. So all that we're doing is we're labeling something that we've been doing forever. And I think where the big shift has to come is that should be in every classroom, every day for every kid. And I would tell you the other thing for a teacher and even for a principal is that there is such a great network out there. CollabED is one of those, and it's such a great opportunity for people just to come together and say, hey, I'm struggling with this. What do I do? Or, holy cow, I just did this and it worked beautifully. Find out what your network is going to be. Of course, I'm advocating for CollabED, but I think that there are other things out there that you can just be a part of and start up. But and then don't be afraid to fail. I think that that's one of the biggest things that educators struggle with is failure. And but don't we want our kids to fail? I mean, that's the way that we really grow, is we want them to not be able to figure out the math formula that's involved in the catapult that they're building, because it's going to drive them to have to learn. It's going to drive them to have to do some research and do that. The same thing applies to teachers, and principals and administrators. If we're not willing to fail and admit when we failed, I'll back up. This has been a real humbling year, because I feel like as superintendent and principal, we've apologized a lot to parents and said, yeah, you're right, we didn't get that right. How do you think we should do it better? And so you've got to be willing to fail in order to get better.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. It can be hard to admit that, hard to share it, and but it sounds like it's been important part of the transformation process.
Absolutely.
It also sounds like, it's a balance when you do this kind of life skills readiness. It's a balance with those state accountability standards. You can't throw out what the state is expecting, but you can work to find a balance. You can do less test prep, as you mentioned. You can, really put the focus on those life skills and still incorporate what you're beholden to at the state level and some of those accountability standards. I'm
Yeah.
curious along those lines of balance, just for you personally. This work is hard. As you mentioned, it's messy, it's nonlinear. You fail, you need to be humble and admit your mistakes and ask others, how can I do better? What can we do better? Um, how do you find balance? What does that work life balance look like for you?
Yeah. It doesn't. I'll be. That's an area that I'm failing at. I my respite, my saving grace is that I have just an amazing family, and I'm able to go home and my beautiful, wonderful wife talks is just like, oh, it's been a rough day, and I can tell, and let's make tacos for dinner because who isn't happy when you have tacos for dinner? And so I honestly look back at this last year, and if I were to change anything, I would find a way to leave what I'm doing here at the school and not take it home with me, and probably not work the 12, 14-hour days that sometimes it was needed. And yet I don't know that I would change that either, because it got us to where we need to be. So I think you've got to have that support base. If at any time I felt like I was ruining my family over what I was doing here, family's more important than my job, and so that's always kind of my litmus test. Is if I'm not snapping at my own kids or wife at home, and I'm still able to just be there and be present when I need to be there. That's my balance. I think that I envy those that have great exercise routines and everything like that. That if you've done that, stick with it, because when you embark on something that is so transformative in the fashion that we did, there was a year that I spent most of my time sitting behind a computer or out working with kids and stuff, and that's the highlight. That, I guess, that would be the other balance piece that I'd say is, for an administrator, be a part of the process in the classrooms, and yeah, don't sit behind your desk during the day. You've got plenty of time in the morning and evening to do that. So be out with the teachers and with the kids, see what's happening. I would encourage every principal or superintendent, every 5 years, teach a class. It regrounds you. It gets you back into that. Next year, I'll be teaching German again, and so I'm looking forward to going back into the classroom, and now I'll be right there with other teachers, like, figuring out how do I collaborate with English and social studies and trades and art for German, and what that will look like. And I think that helps ground us, and also help us to understand the demands that our teachers and students feel every day.
Yeah, thank you. Very real, authentic response. And it made me think about the growth mindset work and fixed mindset versus growth
Yep,
mindset. Balance doesn't necessarily have to mean everything is in balance all the time. Just as growth mindset doesn't mean you have to always have a growth mindset, but it's more important to be able to recognize when are you having a fixed mindset and what can you do to get yourself out
that's
of
good.
that. And the balance is almost, you don't have to have the perfect balance. If you don't have the exercise routine, or maybe you do, but you fall off of it for a week or two or something like that, but you're able to recognize when are things out of balance and what can I do to help restore it. And that's almost more important than trying to hold on to this perfect level of balance all the time.
Yeah, I loved a statement that was made by a gentleman named David Bednar. And when asked about balance, he kind of talked about it's pretty impossible to always balance. But what's most important is to be present in whatever you're doing at that moment. And I love that. And I think that kind of changed my perspective as well as even though I may not be giving the hours that I want at home, when I'm home, I'm home. So giving it its due time. So sitting down and talking with my sophomore daughter and being able to just listen to her is more important than anything else in that moment. And so I love that. I think that balance comes when we determine to be present in those settings that we find ourselves in.
Well, thank you, Shane. I think on that note, we're going to wrap up our conversation, but really appreciate you taking the time, sharing your story, sharing the lessons that you've learned with our audience on the BBE podcast. And what you talked
Yeah,
about, it starts with students. If students are demanding it, maybe it will happen. And that's exactly why we have CollabED, as you were saying. If
yeah,
teachers start working together and demanding it, it's going to come from them, and those larger shifts will start to happen. So,
love it.
again, really appreciate the time.
You bet. So if you're listening and you're not a part of CollabED, get on CollabED. And if you're in CollabED, make sure to come join our channel at the Student Centered Practices channel. We want to learn from you. So just an open invitation there.
Yeah. Thank you so much, and we'll
Thanks,
see you
Daniel.
next time.
All right. Bye bye.